If you've been paying attention to what Honda's been up to lately, you'll know that the brand is on a bit of a roll with cars like the Civic, the HR-V, and the newly introduced ZR-V. The brand is trying to recreate its glory days. It wants to get back to what Honda was like in the 80s and 90s. It wants to be mainstream, but premium, and they've done it again with this, the new CR-V. The CR-V takes that kind of development and applies it to a medium SUV, kind of Australia's family car heartland. This is a car with rivals like the Toyota RAV4 and the Mitsubishi Outlander firmly in its sights. So, does that new Honda vibe carry over to the new CR-V? Well, we're going to take a look inside and out and go for a drive to find out. So jump in with me and let's have a look. Honda is a little different to most other brands with a no-haggle, fixed pricing approach. As such, you can get into a base model CR-V VTIX from $44,500 drive away, no matter where you live in Australia. The range covers 7 variants. You can get the base VTIX with 5 or 7 seats and front drive, and the mid-spec VTIL comes with the same options plus a 5-seat all-wheel drive version. At the top of the range, there's a choice of VTI LX all-wheel drive or eHEV RS, which is the only hybrid model in the CR-V range, and both come with 5 seats. There's a heap of new standard features, but some highlights include a 9-inch infotainment system on all grades, wireless phone charging, hands-free powered tailgate, powered driver's seat, and dual-zone climate control on 5-seat models, or 3-zone on 7-seaters. By the time you arrive at the top of the range, you get things like 19-inch alloy wheels, panoramic sunroof, leather seat trim, ambient cabin lighting, a fully digital instrument cluster, and a 12-speaker Bose sound system. At $57,000 and $59,900 drive away respectively for the LX and RS grades though, those luxuries don't come cheaply. If you want to learn more about everything available in each grade of the CR-V, head to Drive.com.au for full price and spec details. Under the bonnet, petrol models use a revised version of the previous CR-V's 1.5-litre turbo petrol engine, producing the same 140 kilowatts and 240 newton meters, but with a range of improvements to noise and refinement. A CVT automatic is the only transmission available across the range. Official fuel consumption is rated between 7.1 to 7.7 litres per 100 kilometres, depending on the variant. Honda's hybrid system pairs a non-turbo 2-litre engine with 2 electric motors for 135 kilowatts combined, and fuel consumption is rated at 5.5 litres per 100 kilometres. If you're familiar with the old CR-V, you'll know that there's a pretty significant step change to how the new one looks. There's a couple of things that really make a difference. The old one was pretty rounded and pretty soft, and that's, well, basically just a symptom of it being an older generation car. This new one is much, much sharper. And you'll see that particularly in the very blade-type headlights. It's got a grille that carries through into the headlights with that design element to make it look lower and wider, and Honda has done a lot of work to make this car look essentially bigger and more imposing. The car that I've got here is the top grade. That is the CR-V eHEV RS, which is a terrible name, but we'll put that aside. I'll call it the RS from now on. It comes with a bunch of body-coloured elements and black highlights that kind of accentuate its position as the sporty top-line model. I think it works. I think Honda has done a really good job with this car. And if you come with me, I'll show you a couple of other things. Proportions matter. So Honda has stepped the bottom of the windscreen back slightly, which gives a longer and flatter bonnet. You may not think much of that overall, but it really makes for a more dynamic-looking car. On this model, you get things like body-coloured wheel arch mouldings and body-coloured sills through the bottom, and being the RS, it gets a black pack, so black wheels, and you get black mirrors as well. To make room for the new Honda ZR-V range, which is slightly smaller but still considered a medium SUV, the CR-V has had a growth spurt. The new car is 69mm longer and 11mm wider on the outside than the model it replaces, and the wheelbase has grown by 40mm to allow for more space for occupants. The most obvious external difference between grades are the alloy wheels. They're 17 inches on the base VTIX, 18s on the VTIL, and 19s on the 2 top grades. Otherwise, all cars use the same grille, same LED lighting at the rear, and only carry minor external details to tell them apart. Honda's reinvention continues inside, but you can be forgiven for thinking you've seen this all before. It's a very similar look to what you get in the Civic, but it is a little bit bigger and a little bit more scaled up. Again, because we're in the top spec RS model, everything gets the faux sporty treatment. So there's a lot of black on black detailing. There's black gloss across the dash, some dark metallic highlights, and you get things like red contrast stitching on the seats. But overall, the ambiance is, I guess, more mature than the old CR-V was. It's certainly more horizontal, so you really get a sense of spaciousness as a result. And just like the exterior styling, the interior styling is designed to kind of emphasize the low profile and wide proportions of the new CR-V. Across the range, you get things like dual zone climate control, but if you opt for a 7-seat model, you get 3-zone climate control. There is a wireless charge pad on every variant, but there's also a big enough space in the center console to put 2 phones side by side, although you can only charge one at a time. You get dual cup holders up front. There's a little storage space there for 3 keys or perhaps a little pen holder. And in the center console, there is a removable but not sliding pocket under the lid. It's quite a deep space too and fairly wide, so plenty of space to store your odds and ends. In front of the driver, there's a 10.2-inch digital display in this spec, but in base cars, you get a 7-inch display. So it's got basically one analog dial and a partially digital instrument cluster. You can cycle through a range of settings on that, and it's all pretty easy to operate and navigate through the buttons on the steering wheel. Every variant gets an 8-way powered driver's seat, but again, as you move up through the range, you can also add a powered passenger seat. There's a manual steering wheel on every variant, and that is both tilt and reach adjustable. And weirdly, with such a low bonnet line and a high driver's seat, I don't feel like I'm sitting up or oddly proportioned. It's actually a pretty good position. I quite like that the window line is low. It gives you really good visibility. The pillars are, by modern standards, incredibly slim, and it feels like Honda has done a lot of work to kind of maximize airiness and visibility. But overall, the cabin is really quite high quality. It looks and feels up to scratch, and it's kind of impressive, especially when you consider what the old car was like. And if you're moving out of an older CR-V into this new generation model, I reckon you'll really appreciate the step up. Honda's aim with the new CR-V interior has been to remove clutter, and I think they've nailed that brief. The CR-V looks clean and sophisticated inside. While Honda hasn't opted for under-console storage like you get in an X-Trail, and it's deleted the flexible space under the armrest from the previous model, everything still works well. There's a reassuring click weight, and the consistency of interior buttons and knobs when you use them is impressive. Oddly though, Honda has retained a traditional gear selector in all grades, instead of opting for a push-button E-shifter like you'll find in other Honda hybrids. Infotainment on all grades is via a 9-inch touchscreen with wireless Apple CarPlay and wired Android Auto connectivity. You get satellite navigation in the VTI-L and above, and a 12-speaker Bose audio system with subwoofer in the LX and RS grades, replacing the standard 8-speaker system in the lower models. Backseat passengers in the CR-V don't come off second best either. It's got a stadium seating arrangement, so the rear seats are quite a bit higher than the fronts, which means that I can see over the head of the driver and get a good clear view out. There's a couple of things back here that you do get, like air vents in the back of the center console, plus 2 USB-C charging ports, but there are a couple of things you don't get, things like window blinds on the back doors, and you don't get soft touch finishes on the tops of the doors. But other than that, it is still a very nice place to be. Honda has added some additional movement or adjustment to the rear seat, so it now has a multi-adjustable backrest as opposed to the 2 steps of the old model. Plus, you can slide the seats forward, and that's not just in 7-seat models, that's across the range. So if you need to free up a little bit more cargo space, you can slide the back seats forward a little bit and do that. Or if you've got little ones in the back that you'd like a little bit closer to the front seats, you can set up the position for that and have everyone within arm's reach or out of arm's reach, whichever you prefer. On top of that, you get the usual kind of back seat fare. There is a fold-down armrest in the back seat. It's got 2 cup holders in it. They're actually quite narrow, so you're not going to fit every shape of cup or bottle in existence, but for a can of Coke or something like that, they'll probably do the trick. I quite like it back here. That's my driving position in front. I'm not the tallest person in the world. I'm 169 centimetres, but I've got so much space, it's kind of embarrassing, really. Plus, there is a bit of space under the front seat, so if you're a little bit closer to the seat or a little bit longer legged, you can still get your toes under the front seats. The floor itself is fairly flat, so there's no step over there, and if you get stuck in the middle seat, there's still room to put your feet and maybe stretch out just a little bit. Rear seats are being given a glow up with a backrest that can be adjusted through 16 positions and an extra 10 degrees of recline angle. All models have 190mm of slide adjustment, and even though Honda didn't have any 7-seat versions available at the Australian launch, there's a new 1-lever access that tilts the whole seat forward to get you into the third row. It should now be much easier to access the rear row of seats in the new CR-V, which wouldn't be difficult given the old model was a bit of a pain to get into. Plus, it's more user-friendly for families with child seats. Like just about every other area of the CR-V, the boot has gotten bigger as well. And there's a couple of things in here that I quite like. One is that there is a LED light on each side of the boot, and 2, there is a decent-sized bag hook on each side as well. One of my pet peeves are bag hooks that don't actually hold a bag. There's no underfloor storage though. There's a little bit of space, and I mean just a little bit, and it's got just a scant amount of storage, but otherwise you get your tyre repair goo and the compressor. There's no spare wheel, not even a space saver. This boot floor doesn't come up. It's fixed, and I find that really perplexing. But if you were to get a 7-seat CR-V, that's where your third row goes. Also, every CR-V model, and it doesn't matter how much or how little you spend, comes with a powered tailgate and walk-away lock. So, if you have your arms full of groceries and leave with the key, the tailgate will close itself, the car will secure itself, and you don't have to do the magic dance to get the keys out of your pockets with your hands full of groceries. Boot space in 5-seat models is 67 litres larger than before, with up to 589 litres of storage available. In 7-seat models, there's 472 litres of available storage with the third row folded flat, or 150 litres with the third row up, which is unchanged from the previous generation. I have to hand it to Honda's engineers. The way that this thing drives is probably the biggest revelation out of the whole package, but it comes with a condition, and it's a bit of a big one. The hybrid that I'm in right now is far and away the best variant of the CR-V to drive. It's actually less powerful than the turbo petrol. It has 135 kilowatts versus 140 in the regular cars, but it has way more torque, 335 newton meters versus 240. And that matters because that gives it more flexibility around town. But it's not just that. Nobody is buying this car because it's a performance car, buying it because they want it to kind of disappear or shrink into the background. And that's where the hybrid really puts its best foot forward. It's so quiet. And I know hybrid systems are meant to be quiet. They're electric part of the time and the petrol engine only chimes in when it needs to. But Toyota hybrids really let you know when the petrol engine chimes in. Haval hybrids run the petrol engine quite a lot. Honda's hybrid, unless you're looking at the little status screen that tells you what engine is doing what, you probably won't know. It prioritizes electric running quite a lot, but then at higher speeds, you are, by the very nature of a hybrid, going to rely on the petrol engine. The way it cuts in and out is almost seamless. You can get this thing up to 60 kilometers an hour or more without the petrol engine starting. It's that strong on electricity alone. And that's where it's different to the petrol car. The turbo petrol CR-V is still a very good thing, but it's a lot more like the old generation CR-V. It's a little bit noisier, and it's a little bit, I guess, less cultured or less civilized through its transmission. It's still a CVT auto, they both are, but it tends to rev flare a little bit more, and if you do floor the throttle, sometimes it will pick a point in the revs and just hold there. Other times it'll kind of go to a fake regular transmission mode. This is also a CVT, but it's stepped nearly all the time. You just find that as you're driving along and there's no tacho to see what the revs are doing, you can feel it almost change through, I guess, their pseudo gears, and it makes for, I guess it's a much more traditional kind of driving process. So if you've stepped out of a car that is anything other than a Honda, this is probably going to feel a lot more like what you're used to. This is also, I think, maybe one of the best steering medium SUVs that I've been in for a while. And look, it's not a high benchmark. Medium SUVs aren't designed to be driver's cars. There's some good ones out there. I think the Mazda CX-5 is pretty good. I think the new generation X-Trail does a good job. And I reckon that this is kind of up there. The steering is a little bit heavier than you get in most SUVs of this size, so it's maybe not as easy to just twirl into a tight parking space. But it's also not heavy. It's just slightly heavier. So you get a really nice connected feel to the road. There's no twitchiness at highway speeds. It's not bouncing between lane markings and you don't have to chase it everywhere. It's both relaxed and also alert. If you do tip it into a corner, it's pretty faithful, and the front wheels are easy to pick. You know exactly where they are and what they're doing. The suspension, I reckon, is pretty good, but it's not perfect. Can be a little bit crashy. The hybrid is on 19-inch wheels, and the VTI LX petrol wears the same 19s. They don't have a lot of sidewall, so you'll notice some hits and dips, but they're not terrible, they're okay. As you step down through the range, there's 18 and 17-inch wheels, so if you get a base model on 17s, you get a really fat sidewall. I'd probably pick that one if you wanted the most comfortable car to drive around in. Fundamentally, it is really hard to pick flaws in this car. The way it drives is really good. The fuel consumption on the hybrid is pretty impressive. This hasn't been a normal stop-start drive. It's been mostly open roads with a few little demanding sections. And we've got between 5.5 litres per 100, which is the claim, up to 6.2 litres per 100 at the very worst. In the petrol cars, a little bit different, 7.7 litres to 8.3, depending on the car that we're in, 7.7 in a front-wheel drive. But neither one of those has returned terrible fuel consumption figures. This one is by far the best, which means it's a little bit of a crime that you can only get the best car in the top spec grade. I reckon a mid-spec VTI L with a hybrid would be an absolute winner for Honda, and it would mean that you don't have to spend $60,000 to get into one. The problems that this car has are the things that make it harder to recommend are some of the features it doesn't have. And I find it really weird that a car that is launching in 2023 doesn't have a 360-degree camera. It's got a reverse camera only. I find it a bit weird that this top spec model doesn't have things like an extra climate zone for the second row. 3-row models do, but this is a pretty expensive car and it's pretty well featured otherwise. It doesn't have things like cooled front seats, heated rear seats, or window blinds on the side windows. They're not essential items, but in, I guess, what is a near prestige medium SUV, they would be really, really good inclusions. And I find it a little bit odd that Honda has kind of left them out. In saying that though, the things that are here are pretty good, and it is a very enjoyable car to drive, more so than what the rest of the medium SUV class is. So, if maybe some minor thrills from behind the wheel, or just absolute serenity while you're on a long road trip is the thing that you're after, the CR-V is a good place to start, and the CR-V Hybrid RS is probably the best place to finish.
The new CR-V hasn't been tested by Crash Test Authority ANCAP yet, nor its European equivalent, so there's no applicable safety rating for it at the time of publishing this review. All models in the range come with 11 airbags, including new additions to the CR-V range like driver and passenger knee airbags, an airbag between the front seat occupants, and rear seat side airbags. Safety and driver assist systems include new sensors and detection tech to monitor more of what's around the car and provide a greater range of features. You get autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection, lane keep assist, lane departure warning and lane centering assist, adaptive cruise control with stop and go and traffic jam assist capability, traffic sign recognition, and more. All models, bar the 5-seat VTIX,
include blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert. But oddly, no grade of the CR-V is available with things like a 360-degree camera or a driver's head-up display, which feels like a big miss for an all-new model. All right, well, we've had a look inside. We've had a pretty good drive, as you can see by some of the dirt on the car. And I have to say that try as I might, it's been pretty hard to pick faults with the new CR-V. Now, there are a couple, but like I mentioned, most of those are spec related. You're actually getting a pretty good car. I really like the way it drives. I really like the space inside, but I'm just not sure that by the time you're paying 60 grand for a top spec car like this, you should be missing out on a couple of little things that most of its rivals have. Other than that though, for a frugal hybrid, the CR-V RS really nails the brief. But there is a CR-V at just about every price point for just about every family budget. And when you weigh it up, things like driveway pricing that you don't have to haggle for might actually make this a much better deal than it looks on the surface, particularly when rivals advertise their prices before on-road costs. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you like the look of the new CR-V? Do you wish it was any different? Drop me a note and I'll get back to you if I can. And if you haven't already, please give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and check out the channel to find out more about every new car on sale in Australia.